Hello, Matthew, the average gun owner here, and here I am again with another take two. The first one was over 12 minutes long and kind of repeated things. So I just want to talk about the controversy that shouldn't be a controversy at all, and that's the issue with non-citizens being able to own and carry firearms in the U.S. There was a recent court decision recently that created a lot of argument where I don't think people are really arguing two different points, and let me explain why. So it comes down to negative rights versus positive rights. Don't worry, I'm not going to get into the full legal analysis on all of this, but just to summarize, Bill of Rights are negative rights. There are things the government can't do or take away from you. The rest of the Constitution are basically positive rights. A lot of the laws, conveyances, privileges that we give to people in a well-developed society, such as, Medicaid, Medicare, healthcare to people who need it, housing to people who are disabled and can't work, or food stamps to struggling single mothers, things of that nature. You don't have a constitutional right to food, housing, healthcare, a stable job, or any of that, or for your friends or neighbors to like you. You don't have no constitutional right to that. Our Constitution basically is set up where we have a Bill of Rights, where First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth, Eighth, so the right against unreasonable search and seizure. And look, I get it. Not all government entities are properly restricting their activities as they should under the terms of the Fourth Amendment. Same as they're not with the Second Amendment. There's plenty of violations of our Second Amendment rights. Same thing with their freedom of speech and right to free assembly, right to believe in the religion, exercise of religion that you want to believe in. And I get it. Those are definite issues. But basically at the core, these negative rights are things that are basically natural born rights. For example, let me give you an example. Two examples, the caveman, and then we'll talk about the French ballerina. So the caveman is born in a society where there's no organized government. There's no caveman would think they have the right to free healthcare. No caveman would think they have a right to live in an upscale condo, or they have a right to food stamps or anything like that, because it wasn't available. There's no organized government at the time. But what the caveman did have the right to do was to speak his mind freely, the right to protect himself and his homestead. He had the right to protect himself or fight against unreasonable searches of his cave, or if his neighboring cave dweller didn't like the way he decorated his cave, he couldn't impose capital punishment on him. Those are what we consider natural born rights. I know it's kind of an excessive example, but that's where it is. Now let me get to the French ballerina. Now these people saying, if you're here illegally, you shouldn't have the right to own or carry a firearm. Okay, well, the people who think that anybody in the U.S., whether they are here documented or undocumented, should have a right to own or possess a firearm, really aren't arguing two different things. Let me explain why. French ballerina comes here. She comes here on a visa, on a work visa, and she's going to, be in shows in New York City or LA, and she wraps up her work at 2 a.m. Are you going to tell that French ballerina, hey, you have a right under either your French driver's license or international driver's license to rent a car and drive in the U.S., but you can't defend yourself, your life, and your person at 2 a.m.? No, I don't think anybody really thinks a non-citizen doesn't have the right to free speech or doesn't have the right to self-defense in the U.S. That's not the issue, okay? The issue is we have a completely uncontrolled southern border, and we have a lot of MS-13 gang members, drug dealers. We have the cartel engaged in human trafficking, sex trafficking, and all that. And you have people fleeing to the U.S. And there's no dispute over this, with the gotaways that are on terrorist watch lists, and then you have people fleeing their home countries and coming to the U.S. because they don't want to serve a life prison for murder, so they come to the U.S. and the U.S. doesn't have access to the criminal records of that home country. They come here to the U.S. and they can just run around freely without fear of retribution. So those are the people that I think the most vocal of the internet talking heads are really talking about when they're voicing their concerns about granting Second Amendment rights to people who are here illegally. And I get it, but it's not an issue of the status of whether that person is in America legally or not. It's really a status of whether that person is disqualified under the law from owning a firearm. Someone who we don't want to own a firearm because they've already proven a propensity to hurt their fellow man, murder other people, rape and pillage, and those are the kind of people we don't want running around with guns. I get it, but I don't think people are really arguing two different sides of the coin here. I think what we have is, in the back of some people's mind, they're like, well, our border's completely unregulated and there's just thousands of people coming over and a lot of them have criminal records. And why do I have to follow the law in the US? And why do I have to file for this permit in New Jersey and wait 2 months and go through a criminal background check when this other person's just going to step over the border? They have a 5-page criminal record in the home country, but since they ripped up their ID and left it at the border and came here under a fake name, and we can't match them up with records back home, and we didn't know they were convicted of murder 3 times over, they're going to be able to evade capture and prosecution. Well, that's the problem. It's the issue of enforcement of law and not prosecuting people who should be prohibited persons, and the issue of not prosecuting people who came to the U.S., through illegal means and sitting and getting to be moved freely around the country with a court date 4 years out. So I don't know if I'm really articulating this well, but I don't think we're arguing two different things. I haven't heard anybody really argue, oh, if you're here in the U.S. illegally, if you overstayed a visa, if that French ballerina forgot to renew her HB1 or whatever she's here on, she automatically should be locked up and she should be convicted of driving illegally and possessing a firearm illegally. I don't think that's what the issue is. I think the people who are concerned about this decision are not thinking, yeah, every individual has a natural born right to defend themselves no matter what country they're in. And to be honest with you, if I were to fly to Italy or go drive to Canada, I really think I should have reciprocity and be able to carry my concealed carry firearm there. I get it. Other countries don't recognize that right, but the U.S. should be recognizing that right. And any individual who is here, regardless of their status, should be able to protect themselves while they're here. But we're assuming they're good people. We're assuming that they're people that haven't shown that they can't be trusted with a knife, a firearm, or other defensive implement. And I think that's where the disconnect is. So keep in mind, the people who are being very vocal against this ruling, I think, are not really articulating well that they're really only concerned about the people who have criminal backgrounds and would have otherwise been prohibited possessors, but for the fact that we have absolutely no control over who's coming over our southern border. So next time you hear somebody raise the issue or somebody's arguing it with you, or you're on the fence yourself as to which way you should go, rewind and watch this video again. I didn't script anything out, and I know this may be a little bit of a convoluted just mental explosion or whatnot, but it really is no different than a person's right to come to the U.S. and freely express their thoughts or engage in whatever religion they want. I think anybody who's here in the U.S. should be able to possess a firearm to defend themselves. The only issue, I think, is if that person's a prohibited person, but they're not a prohibited person, but for the fact that our legal system isn't properly prosecuting and our federal government isn't properly policing our border. I think that's just the bottom line. You come here on a work visa, you're here on a green card, you're here on even a visitor's visa, and you show you're a, good, sane, normal, I would say God-fearing, but I don't even care if you believe in God. If you are a good citizen and you're no danger to anybody else, I think you should be able to defend yourself the same way I think I should be able to travel to Europe and defend myself while I'm in Europe. So those are my thoughts for what they're worth. Again, this is Matthew, the average gun owner, and again, I apologize for making a simple concept much more complicated than it really needed to be.